David Nutter is an Emmy Award-winning director who graduated from the University of Florida. While going there, he was originally a music major, but over time, his focus shifted towards filmmaking. After graduating, he directed his first feature, Cease Fire, starring Don Johnson in 1985. He then moved on to directing TV with shows like 21 Jump Street, Superboy, and The Commish. In 1993, he got a huge break by getting a job directing the fledgling TV show, The X-Files. The X-Files became a massive hit, and Nutter developed a working relationship with the TV network Fox. He went on to develop numerous shows for them like Space Above and Beyond and Millennium. During this time, he directed Transfers 4 and 5 back-to-back for Full Moon Entertainment. With both The X-Files and Millennium being hits, his skills as a director were in high demand. He was constantly receiving scripts for films to direct, but none of them interested him. That changed when he saw a script from Scott Rosenberg, the writer of Beautiful Girls, Con Air, and Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. The script was about a doctor who is brainwashing teenagers to make them the perfect kids. He couldn't, however, turn off their hormones, which goes against their programming, making them incredibly violent whenever their sexual urges kick in. A sort of modern spin on the classic 70s film, The Stepford Wives. Nutter loved the script because it had a lot of the elements present in The X-Files. He thought it carried a great emotional weight and would be something the audience would think about long after the film was over. With Nutter agreeing to direct, the studio wanted to fast-track the production. At the time, he was working on the pilot for the TV show Sleepwalkers for Columbia. In order to get things up and running quickly, he had to pull in a lot of favors and brought in numerous folks he worked with on The X-Files and Millennium. For the main cast, he wanted a group of actors who were on the rise but still relatively unknown. James Marsden read for the lead Steve. He was one of the first to audition, and Nutter thought he was perfect. Nick Stahl read for the part of Gavin. The character was originally written as an overweight loudmouth that no one listened to, but after seeing Stahl's performance, they hired him and rewrote the part. Nutter said Stahl had a sage-like quality, and nicknamed him Yoda Stahl. While they were casting, the show Dawson's Creek had been filming, but had yet to air. Everyone in the main cast auditioned for the film by sending in tapes of them reading their lines. One day Nutter was going over the dailies for the pilot of Sleepwalkers when he accidentally put the wrong tape in the machine. Instead of being the dailies for Sleepwalkers, it was the dailies for an episode of Dawson's Creek. Dawson's Creek was also a Columbia show, which is why it was there. The scene focused on Katie Holmes, and he immediately knew that she was right for the role of Rachel. Since they'd be filming in Vancouver, they hired a local Canadian actor, Chad Dinella, to play the outcast UV, although he'd be covered in makeup and almost unrecognizable from how he normally looks. William Sadler read for the part of Dorian Newberry. He read his lines with a voice Nutter described as an underground Popeye.
What are you shitbirds doing down here?
Relax, Mr. Newberry.
You ain't supposed to be down here.
He cast Ethan Embry to play Steve's brother Alan. A young Catherine Isabel was hired to play Steve's sister Lindsay. She was the daughter of Graham Murray, the production designer for The X-Files. The rest of the cast was comprised of people he'd worked with in the past. Bruce Greenwood was hired to play Dr. Caldecott. Nutter had just worked with him on the pilot for Sleepwalkers. Steve Railsback was Officer Cox. Nutter worked with him on The X-Files. Lorna Longley was played by Crystal Cass, who Nutter worked with on Millennium. His DOP was John S. Bartley, who was the cinematographer for the first 3 years of The X-Files. Nutter was used to filming in Vancouver, Canada, so they prepped a film there because he knew plenty of locations already, and he'd be able to stretch his budget further up there. With a $15 million budget, they began filming in Vancouver, Canada. Filming started in March of 1998 and was scheduled to go through to May. Many of the locations were places Nutter had shot at before. The shipyard in Vancouver was in the X-Files episode Beyond the Sea. The high school was really a few different schools where he filmed episodes of 21 Jump Street. The bridge was in Stanley Park, Vancouver, where Frank Black chased a killer in Millennium. The hospital was a former psychiatric facility they used in the X-Files. The yogurt shop was an empty store the art department redressed. The exterior and some of the interiors were a house in Vancouver. Some of the rooms were sets. Nutter wanted to subvert the audience's expectations with the opening. He started the film off like so many other teen films, with two kids fooling around at a lookout point. However, instead of having sex, the jock snaps the girl's neck. For the scene where Gavin explains the different groups in the school, they wanted to do something to set them apart, so they changed the lighting for each group. For the motorheads, they added a light green tint. For the microgeeks, they added a light blue tint. The skaters got a yellow tint, and the blue ribbons got a deep blue tint. While they were filming, Dawson's Creek started to air and became a huge hit. The studio wanted them to focus on the now teen idol Katie Holmes, so they asked Nutter to give her a big entrance. He obliged. Holmes' character in Dawson's Creek was kind of a good girl, so she went against type in this with a grungy look and abundance of piercings. The characters of Newberry and Caldecott are named after John Newberry and Randolph Caldecott. The John Newbery Medal is a literary award given for the most distinguished contribution to American literature for children. The Randolph Caldecott Medal is an award given to the most distinguished American picture book for children. Lindsay playing with the alien autopsy was an homage to, what else? The X-Files. The scene where Steve is being forced into the chair was an homage to Total Recall. The scientist was the stunt coordinator, J.J. McEnroe. The car going off the cliff was a digital composite, but the people were real. They were all stuntmen on wires, and they digitally removed the wire. Caldecott was also a stuntman, not digital. An ongoing joke with Nutter was the phrase, treat yourself. He's had people say this line in almost all of his works.
How much do I owe you for this?
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
Filming wrapped in May, and they moved into post. Nutter spent the next several weeks editing the film. When showing the blue ribbons going haywire, originally it just showed them snapping. Nutter didn't feel that was enough to convey what was going on, so they added the light in their eyes in post. Nutter's director's cut was 115 minutes long. Nutter wanted to grab the audience's attention in the beginning, so he worked with composer Mark Snow from The X-Files. Snow took the director's cut and developed the score for the film. Snow returned with a haunting score that fit the film perfectly. The director was very proud of his cut. It had emotion, depth, and was more than just a teen horror flick. Nutter took his director's cut and screened it for the studio, who loved it. The movie was about the Clark family. After Stephen's brother Alan and his girlfriend Abby commit a murder-suicide, the remaining family moves to a new town to get away from the bad memories and heal. They move to Cradle Bay, a town the parents heard was filled with some of the best and brightest children. Only there's a sinister reason as to why the kids are the way they are. Even though the executives were happy with the film, they wanted to screen it for test audiences. The first screening was overwhelmingly positive. They showed it to a crowd of 15 to 24-year-olds, the movie's target demographic, and the response was good, with the exception of a few people who didn't like certain scenes in the film. So rather than side with the majority who liked the film, the executives sided with the minority and told the director to cut the scenes out. Nutter fought with the studio over this, but lost and cut the scenes. The studio said it was all about mathematics, not moments. They'd take longer scenes and tell him he'd have to cut them in half or remove them completely. He cut 20 minutes out of the film, bringing the runtime to 95 minutes. At the next screening, the audience complained about the ending. They gave Nutter some additional funds and made him shoot a new ending. The original ending was a down ending. They made him shoot a more upbeat one that leaves the door open for a sequel. He did it under protest. After this, the studio took the film away from Nutter and brought in their own editor. At the next screening, the audience didn't like the new ending, but the studio ignored those complaints. The film was recut yet again. The executives were now complaining the film was too slow. Faster, faster, get to the next scare! The new cut time for the film was 72 minutes. They held another screening, and the audience hated it because the film didn't make any sense. Incredibly disheartened, Nutter considered taking his name off the film. The studio recut the film yet again, and this time it ran 84 minutes. They held one more screening, this time just a few weeks before it was set to hit theaters. This time, the audience response was positive. The studio then took this version and released it into theaters. The movie opened on July 24th, 1998, in 7th place with a little over $7 million. Some theater chains pulled the movie after 1 week. It ended its run a week later with a total of about $17.5 million. The movie received mostly negative reviews, which frustrated Nutter because the complaints were all about the things the studio removed. What did they take out? They removed almost all the scenes with the parents because they thought it slowed the film down. There was a scene early on where Caldecott talks at length about his daughter. This was so that later, when they see what really happened to his daughter, it has a greater impact. Newbery tells Steve about how Caldecott arrived and why the parents were so eager to let him manipulate their children.
3 years ago, 4 kids, seniors from this high school, on a Saturday night got properly squiffed on Daddy's gin, raced through a red light and smashed into Mrs. Elaine Bosco, pillar of the community, and her son, 8-year-old Scotty, on their way home from the yogurt shop. Everybody died.
The studio said it was boring. Too much talking. This despite the fact that it introduced a bond between the characters and established a very important bit of history into the story.
Kids don't drive drunk in Cradle Bay no more. Of course, they don't laugh or dance neither.
There's a scene where Gavin takes Steve to the morgue to show him the body of Mary Jo, the girl killed in the beginning. They got there, but her tattoo was cut off and she was decapitated. There was a scene where Officer Cox picks up Steve after he's chased by the Blue Ribbons. This added suspense and re-established Cox as a threat, as well as part of the town's conspiracy. They completely removed a scene where Steve talks to his dad. This showed that his parents weren't the bad guys. They just felt like failed parents because of what happened to Alan, and they didn't want anything like that to happen to Steve.
Hey.
Yeah.
I love you, son. And there's nothing that we wouldn't do for you.
Steve's nightmare about his brother was much longer. They cut out a scene where Caldecott reveals a more sinister plan, that he's developing this as a prototype for a shadow organization that wants to incorporate it nationwide. Almost all the scenes of Alan and Abby are gone. There was more between Lindsay and Steve. They removed a scene where Steve's mom finds the gun he took from Gavin. She panics, which explains later why they called Caldecott. In the theatrical cut, it just comes from out of nowhere. They drastically reduced the scene on the ferry where Steve explains to Rachel what happened to his brother and insight as to why they moved. They removed a scene where Rachel talks about the town and asks Steve to leave with her. They cut out the love scene between Steve and Rachel. They almost completely removed Lindsay's friend. They also removed the original ending. In the original ending, Gavin survived Newberry leading the Blue Ribbons off the cliff because he had his headphones on. He confronts the group on the ferry, and he's frustrated because he doesn't want to be what he is, but he has no control over it. He goes to shoot him, but UV shoots him before he has the chance to. Gavin then comes around as his old self for a moment before he dies. The group's happy they survived, but sad because they lost their friend who initially tried to warn them. In the theatrical cut, Steve makes it to the ferry and the group escapes Cradle Bay. Then it cuts to another high school where Gavin is now a student teacher, ready to continue Caldecott's work, leaving the movie open for sequels. They also cut out little things here and there, character development, dialogue, and anything the studio deemed boring. Roughly about a half hour was removed. Nutter fought with the studio for the DVD release, asking to have his director's cut put on the disc. Part of the way into the restoration, he was told to stop. The studio refused, but did agree to let him put some of the deleted scenes on the disc as bonus features. Taking the 11 scenes on the disc and editing them back into the film brings the runtime up to 103 minutes, still 12 shy of the director's cut. Shout Factory acquired the rights to the film and tried to release the director's cut, but for whatever reason, the studio refused. The movie on the disc is still the theatrical cut, and the deleted scenes are the same as what's on the DVD. The movie was a financial flop, but thankfully, it didn't hurt Nutter's career. After this, he went on to produce and direct numerous TV shows like Roswell, Smallville, Supernatural, Arrow, Terminator, The Sarah Connor Chronicles, and The Flash. In 2014, he received a Primetime Emmy for his work on HBO's Game of Thrones. He was the director of the infamous Red Wedding scene. Disturbing behavior is an oddity. While I enjoyed the theatrical cut, it's frustrating to know the movie should have been so much more. Even seeing the cut of the film with the deleted scenes added back in gives it so much more punch. Sadly, for whatever reason, the studio didn't want the director's cut released. If Shout Factory couldn't get the rights, there's a pretty good chance it'll never be released. Nutter spoke with the marketing department for the film, who said what happened to his movie was an abortion. I don't understand the logic of hiring Nutter to direct a film, being happy with the results, and then systematically dismantling said film. Why are they so insistent upon fixing a film for a small group that didn't like it, instead of leaving it alone for the larger group who did like it? There's an audience out there who saw the original cut of the film and liked it, but will never be able to see that version again. The movie's been altered so many times, it's a testament to how strong the source material is that the final released version was still good. Nutter has the full director's cut, but the studio won't allow its release. He showed it to the horror magazine Fangoria, who said, "The once confusing effort now makes complete sense and actually works as an effective study of teen paranoia and small-town conformity. It's a shame the studio didn't trust the director, as well as the first reaction, and just released the original cut. They had a smart, sad tale about a family overcoming grief, and a town that was using tragedy to force people into being what they perceived as good citizens. Instead, we got an entertaining but flawed film. A rush production that isn't given enough time to explore its themes, and feels like another kids versus adults movie, instead of kids versus a bigger threat, someone who thinks they know what's best for everyone else."
Hey, not so fast.
What?
What's the capital of North Dakota?
How the fuck should I know?
Okay, you're cool.